Tonight, I am going to be continuing talking about the book, The Practice of Lojong by Tralek Rinpoche. And I am starting a new section. This is point number 6, commitments of mind training. And I want to emphasize commitments. These are types of behavior that we are committed to avoid doing in most of the cases. To begin this section, these commitments in the Tantra world, it's called samaya. These commitments are to be taken seriously. It's a lot more serious than a New Year's Eve resolution that 2 weeks later, well, okay, I've tried that. Let's go back to the regular old, get off the diet and go back to what I usually eat, that sort of thing. So this is considered to be taken seriously, and that perseverance is very important. Tralek Rinpoche said that a English language equivalent would be a pledge or an oath. And there are 16 precepts in this chapter, 16 slogans that are commitments that we are going to be going through. And it's important to remember that these are, you might say, long-term goals or vision that we are looking not to change overnight, but gradually over time. That is a very important point. This is not, well, from now on, I am going to be this way all the time, no matter what, because that is not going to happen. There is no formal ceremony or vow ceremony for these. You just take these on yourself and do the best that you can to keep these commitments. And if you, of course, err, then renew your commitment to practice them. And of course, because of our habitual patterns, we will make mistakes and we will backslide and so on and so forth. That we're human and we have to realize that, but just expect that we can gradually, little by little, improve. Another way of putting that, we take these commitments to the best of our ability, to our capacity, and that we need to practice mindfulness and awareness so that we can see how we are doing, so that we can apply these commitments in our daily lives. And as I said, gradually improve. There is a Zen saying that comes to mind. It comes from Suzuki Roshi's book on Zen mind, beginner's mind. Quote, hasten slowly. The idea is that you have this motivation, this desire to work on it, to be diligent, and so on and so forth. But you do not expect to have quick progress. The first slogan is number 23. It's the first in this section, section 6. Always practice the 3 general principles. So this is a commitment to practice these 3 general principles. And this has to do with our motivation to practice mind training. And this is about maintaining a sense of impartiality and guarding against distortion, guarding against seeing things in an unclear way, that we all see, you might say, through the lens of our own ego, and that distorts things. And we want to maintain this sense of impartiality and try to have as little distortion as possible. So there are 3 separate principles here. They are: remember to value your commitment, refrain from distorted forms of thinking, and refrain from falling into a partiality. So to go into those individually, remember to value your commitment means to deliberately think about your commitment to mind training and to this slogan. Remember about your commitment to do something beneficial, something meaningful and purposeful with our lives. And when it says remember, that means to continually remind yourself, to continually remember, not once every few months, but just continually remind yourself. Become more aware of your daily life, more attentive to the daily routine that we live in. We can make good use of the situations, whether they are working well or aren't working so well. Either way, we can make good use of it. We can skillfully extract something meaningful from even a difficult situation. And in fact, a difficult situation can be a very rich source of growth. I was thinking about this situation today. In fact, I think I have it written down later on in another point, but I'm going to bring this up. And that was that when I was a prison chaplain, one Sunday, the Christian volunteers did not show up for the service, and they called in at the last moment, or maybe they didn't even call in at all. And I had a couple of choices. I could just cancel. That would have been totally acceptable. Just send the men back to their units and have no service. I decided I'll lead the service. I'm the chaplain. I grew up Lutheran. I had supervised a number of chapel services, Christian chapel services, and I had inmate praise choir working for me. And so I led the service, and I can't remember exactly what I talked about, but I thought it went well. And Monday morning, an inmate comes into my office and says, "You had no right to lead that service. You're a Buddhist monk." I had my monk clothes on, of course. I said, "Well, I'm the chaplain. I can do that." "No, you can't, yada, yada, yada." "Yes, I can, yada, yada, yada." And his voice kept getting louder and louder, and my voice kept getting louder and louder. And finally I said, "Get out of here," because I was mad. And the prison rules, when you get a direct order from a staff member, you've got to follow it, or else guards come in and escort you to segregation. So he quickly got up and went to the door, turned around, looked at me, and said, "Gotcha. That's why I came in to begin with." He wanted to get me mad. That was a very good lesson. I learned a lot that time, and I never got again. That's about the difficult situations can sometimes be the most fruitful. The second point is refrain from distorted forms of thinking. This means to approach our mind training practice with sincerity and honesty and avoid misinterpretation. When we're misinterpreting and distorting, this will obstruct our practice. It can even lead us down instead of leading us up. He specifically talks about going out of your way with austerity, to make a big deal out of it. Make it look in the eyes of other people like you're really a great practitioner, or doing things that could actually harm your health in terms of diet. Or he says, or harm your mind. We want to protect our mind too. Don't get wrapped up in thinking that you are the greatest yogi out there and trying to show everybody else that that's who you are too. This is totally misunderstanding and distorting mind training slogans. Quote, "Examine where you might go wrong. You have erred when your spiritual practice becomes offensive." So don't go around offending other people with your behavior. And quote, "useless asceticism." For instance, not taking a bath. Take a bath. People will appreciate it. And of course, you can even become proud that you are practicing the 7 points of mind training, and proud that you are a Buddhist, and on and on and on and on. And this, of course, is totally deceptive and a huge problem. So your commitment is to avoid this, to fit in with other people. If necessary, take a bath now and then, eat healthy, and so forth. The third is to refrain from falling into partiality. It's impossible for us to be impartial towards everyone in our daily lives. If someone would come up to me and tell me they can do that, I'm not going to tell them they're a liar. I just am going to go, The point is that we know we are not up to this at this point in our practice. But when we are alone practicing, we can do much better. When we don't have the troublemaker in the room with us, it's much easier to be impartial. Push yourself to do more when you're doing Tonglen. Think about other difficult people and do Tonglen for them. So practice impartiality that way. And try to generate more positive feelings towards difficult people. Again, when I was in the subway last night, an experience came to mind. It might have been the last time I was in a subway. It was in Menominee, and a man came in there, a big man, and he was a bully. And he started yelling at the staff that he wanted a sandwich a certain way, and they were having a special, and he couldn't get this item of some kind or another on it with the special. And he was going to call up the head of Subway in Wisconsin and yada, yada, yada. And this went on and on and on. And he was obviously miserable. The staff was miserable. I've never had such a ruckus in a subway. Maybe at a bar, but not a subway. And this is about a sandwich. And I was thinking last night in the subway, maybe what I should have said was, well, what is it that you want on there that they're not including? I'll pay for it. If that ever happens again, I'm going to do that. I think it might be interesting to see what happens. But anyway, the point being that instead of developing resentment for people, start seeing different ways of working with these people, positive ways, having positive thoughts about the person. Turns out that this man, after he left, I talked to the staff, try to help them calm down. And they said that this is not unusual for him to come in here and start bullying the staff around. And the younger ones usually do give in to the bullying. So anyway, the idea is that if we're training with a biased approach, it doesn't work. We're not gaining anything. And we need to practice to develop impartiality if we're going to progress on these mind training. It's still important to remember that we will have mood fluctuations. And this is not just like a upward progress. It's going to be more up and down, up and down, up and down, but gradually you are improving. The next slogan is change your attitude, but remain natural. Here the commitment is to inner change. Inside, change your mind, your attitude. But on the outside, just remain like you were when you began mind training. Outer change can be more about ego, acting more kind so that people notice you and this sort of thing. So this commitment is, first of all, it's important the way we perceive ourselves. It's important how we relate to our disturbing thoughts and emotions. It's important to be aware of our attitude towards other people. So this is really taking a deep look at ourselves as clearly as possible. What is unimportant is changes to our appearance, our mannerisms, our attire. We're trying to transform our unwholesome inner patterns, our self-destructive attitudes, our obsession with ourselves. And all of this is internal. This isn't about wearing a mala around our necks, having other outward signs that we are a Buddhist, that this is about what people can't see. And what this means is that we try to get along with people outwardly while we transform ourselves inwardly. Here is a quote by Godrakpa. Talking about high dharma is easy. Applying the meaning to the mind stream is hard. And high dharma means talking very scholarly and talking over the heads of others. That is talking about high dharma. So don't do that. Just behave inwardly. The next slogan is don't talk about others' weak points. Here, the commitment is don't discuss the faults of others, their defects, their mistakes, their weak points, and don't do it even in a joking manner. I have said a number of times that if finding fault with others was spiritual, this may be the most spiritual country in the world. It's amazing how when we see a fault in another person, frequently we have that very same fault. A good time to, when you see the fault of another person, to stop and think, do I do that? He says also be careful of nicknames, that nicknames sometimes are given to people in a way to make fun of them. I just thought of a musician back when I was a young boy. His name was Chubby Checkers. Yeah, it would not be good to call a person chubby, especially a female. This is obviously making fun of them. So be careful about nicknames. So we need to maintain mindfulness and awareness of our verbal activity and make sure that it is not aimed at the weak points of other people. So we are committing ourselves to an attitude of non-interference, non-harm towards others. Shantideva here talks about how to look at difficult people. Quote, thus, when enemies or friends are seen to act improperly, be calm and call the mind that everything arises from conditions. In other words, cause and effect. These things are not solid. They arose because of prior conditions and causes. So if we can let go of our convictions, our thoughts, our attitudes about the behavior of others, if we can't let go of these, then we should at least tell it to the person's face rather than talking to them behind their back. And we should always have the intention, the motivation that we want to help people rather than cause injury. So if you are going to tell them to their face, do it in a way that is helpful rather than will hurt them emotionally or otherwise. And the best, of course, is to be encouraging and comforting when you get the opportunity. Again, he quotes here from Atisha, avoid belittling others and remain respectful in your manners. When giving advice to others, have compassion and the thoughts for their benefit. So then is slogan number 26. Don't think about the affairs of others. Here, the commitment is that our criticism and interpretations of others, this is not our verbal speech. This is what we're thinking about others' lives, are our own projections and perceptions. We look into a mirror, see a dirty face, and try to wash the mirror. You've all heard me many times talk about a singing bowl, and my mother saw it as a planter. Dog sees it as a dish to have food or water in it. A junk dealer would assess the metal and weigh it and give you a price for it. A Buddhist would strike it like that, and so forth. But it's all what we're projecting on the object. So realize that what we are experiencing, our judgments and values, are our own mind, that they are not in the object itself. When we see faults, it is due to the impurity of our own outlook. A being like Yalwang Karmapa would see all beings as the deity, but because of their confusion, they are unable to realize that they are the deity, and they act in a confused way. But this is pure outlook, and so the idea is to keep this in mind and try not to concentrate on the faults of others. In fact, if you're concentrating on the faults of others, that means that you can't think about benefiting them. And how can you bring about positivity if you're not thinking about benefiting them and you're thinking about what's wrong with them? So keep that in mind. Here is a quote by Jamgon Khantrul. This is Jamgon Khantrul the first. Seeing this fault is due to the impurity of my own outlook. Such a fault is not in this person. I am like those people who saw faults in the Buddha, the enlightened one. To put this in plain English, the pot calls the kettle black because only blackness sees black. You can quote me on that one. The idea is that why waste your time on negativity when there is so much positive that we can spend our attention on? So the antidote is to use mindfulness and awareness when we find that we're going into the negative, to redirect our attention into something else, to something positive. Dwelling in the negative doesn't make us happier. It makes us unhappier. So avoid toxic and self-destructive thoughts. And on top of that, it's a waste of time. If we're going to have a positive impact on other people, we have to develop our minds and be more positive and be more at ease with ourselves. The next slogan is, work on the stronger disturbing emotions first. Here, the commitment is that our conflicting emotions are the source of our problems. The Sanskrit word is klesha, which means poison, and it means poison of the mind, that these disturbing emotions poison our mind where we cannot experience the good qualities of our mind, the purity of our mind. So, since the problem is thinking about the faults of others and talking about them, this goes one further, and that is the source of these two problems is our strong conflicting emotions. So examine these emotions that disturb you the most as they arise and see how they cause problems. It's easiest to be aware of them as they arise. And now you can't eradicate them completely, but you can diminish how you react to them. That's all that is being asked with this commitment, is to diminish your reactivity. This is described as working with the symptoms, not the disease, but it's much easier to work with the symptoms. So we train our mind to let go of strong emotions like anger, desire, greed, denial, and so forth. And this gradually becomes a habit, and we are thrown off less. I've heard it being compared to riding a horse, and a good horse person, when the horse shies, they move with the horse. Shying for a horse means that it suddenly moves to one side or the other. And a poor horseman ends on the ground, or a poor horsewoman ends on the ground, take your pick. And one that has skill will be able to maintain their balance and move with the horse, even though it moved very quickly. So it's a bit like this, that when a strong emotion arises, you're not thrown off and then just, you might say, go with the emotion and have a emotional breakdown. So by awareness and mindfulness, paying attention, we can catch ourselves and put a little distance between ourselves and these strong emotions. And again, this is acting within our capacity and capabilities, that we're not trying to be perfect. And when we, shall we say, are unable to follow any of these slogans, then we don't beat ourselves up. We just make the aspiration to be able to do better the next time. There is a quote here by Jamgon Khantrul, which seems very appropriate. Examine your personality, determine which disturbing emotions are the strongest. Concentrate all Dharma practice on them in the beginning and subdue and clear them away. So if we examine our emotions, our strong negative emotions, we find that there is one that we spend the most time thinking about and engaging in. Some people, it's anger. Some people, it is attachment. Some people, it is jealousy. Others, arrogance, and so forth. So figure out which one that you spend the most time in and work on that one. That's the strongest. I have said this before, that it's a bit like putting together a CV. You have one that is your specialty and another that you have proficiency in. And then the others, maybe you don't pay too much attention to. But the more we pay attention to it, the more we examine our mind and look at how a particular situation went, the more we learn about ourselves, the easier it becomes to recognize this and the easier it is to work on them. Here is a quote by Tralek Rinpoche that's in the book. As we feel less disturbed by that emotion, we can deal with it on a deeper level, because we'll gradually learn to recognize its subtle and insidious nature. We begin to realize that these strong emotions are really disruptive to our lives, that they spoil our happiness, they spoil our peace of mind. We want to have our motivations to be transforming ourselves, working with these emotions, weaken them, and become a person of, in his words, integrity, dignity, depth, and weight. The next one is 28. Give up all hope for results. So that is the commitment. And this one is intended to avoid specific problems and expectations. It's possible for the practitioner to develop unrealistic ideas of what the fruition is going to be and try to focus on it and try to be that kind of a person rather than working with the present. Of course, this leads to disappointment and frustration because this is an unrealistic goal. I have said this in the past: a seed never sees the flower. And we are at the seed stage, and well, we don't know what flowering is going to be like. We don't know what it looks like, what color, the fragrance, and so forth. And if we just start imagining things, we're going to be disappointed. And we're going to be living in the future rather than in the present. Tralek Rinpoche says that whether we're pursuing a worldly goal or a spiritual one, it's important to give up hopes for imagined results. Just do it. And you might find that what you imagined was a very, very insignificant part of, and maybe not even a part of, what fruition is. I came up with this analogy. I don't know if it's very good or not, but afterwards I'm going to open it up to question and answers, and you can tell me if you like it. And that is a meal. You don't imagine a great meal and then eat that imagination. First of all, you need to get the food, you need to prepare it and cook it, and then you eat it. So it's like this. Well, we have to do the preparation before we can see the fruition of our preparation. So there is a final quote here by Kunchok Gyaltsen. If you fail to train unconditionally, free of expectations of rewards pertaining to this life or the hereafter, then one aspect of your spiritual practice becomes blind. It is critical, therefore, to train without any hope of reward. So we should constantly remind ourselves of the futility of hope and expectations. And the interesting thing about hope is you can't have hope without fear. Having hope means that you're afraid of something happening. And having fear means that you don't expect things to happen, and they play on each other. This is just my own little personal joke, but there is a street in Eau Claire called Fear Avenue, and I just wonder if there's a woman named Hope that lives on it.